I'm Gabrielle Raymond McGee, the Chief Operating Officer of the Tory Burch Foundation. On behalf of Tory and our foundation team, we're thrilled to have you join us today. For more than a decade, we've been on a mission to empower women entrepreneurs. And now, more than ever, we stand together to support small businesses. We've actually pivoted our efforts and want to help you navigate the COVID crisis. We're collecting and creating some of the best resources and tools that are all available on our website, torybirchfoundation.org, so check it out. We know this is a very complex, confusing, frustrating, and dire time for all people, especially if you own a business. This is why we thought it was so critical to host today's webinar, in hopes of getting clarity and clear next steps on how best to navigate federal relief and beyond. I'm thrilled to welcome two incredible experts who have partnered with us today in hosting the information session. Jeanette Mulvey is the Executive Director of CO, an amazing resource and publication for small businesses from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Make sure you check out uschamber.com/co. It's a really incredible site and easy to navigate. Tom Sullivan is also here, and he's the Vice President of Small Business Policy for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Tom works to translate the views of small businesses into federal policy that empowers and rewards entrepreneurship. Thank you both for being here today. As a reminder, we've collected more than 1,000 questions from you all in advance of this session, and we're going to do our very best to hit on as many of these topics as possible. Additionally, we have some time at the end of the presentation for you to write in questions in the chat box down below. So save your questions for the very end of the presentation. And now, over to Jeanette and Tom for some very timely advice for our small business owners.
Thanks, Gabrielle. Hi, everyone. As Gabrielle said, I'm Jeanette Mulvey, and I am the Content Director for CO, a publication for small businesses from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We would love if you came and visited us after. You can, remember, easily growwithco.com is the easiest way to get to us. So we have a whole small business resource center filled with articles on how to deal with the coronavirus, particularly around the loans and the regulations out of the CARES package. Today, I'm here with Tom Sullivan, who is the Vice President of Small Business Policy for the Chamber of Commerce. And I can tell you that I think there is no one more qualified to address these issues and answer your questions today, so I'm really happy. So hi, Tom.
Hey, Jeanette.
Hi. Before you share your presentation with us, I think that there's a question everybody wants to know, which is, where's the money? We hear that the money's run out, and so before we talk about how to get the money, let's just talk about, is there any money? Can you tell us that?
Well, thank you, Jeanette. You told me a little earlier, there is, in fact, an elephant in both of our rooms, and so let's just get that elephant right out. We had a feeling when yesterday 85% of the $349 billion that is dedicated to the Paycheck Protection Program loans was going to run out of money. We certainly have been hitting the alarm bell for well over a week and had gotten some action, but unfortunately, Congress did not act quick enough to replenish the funds. So they are meeting, let's see, it's 1:20 now. They're meeting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. This is going to be certainly a hot topic of conversation. We are very optimistic that Congress will get the program running again. And if the viewers are wondering, well, why the heck are we having this conversation if they ran out of money? The simple answer is we are treating this as a pause. And we'll certainly get into in the questions and answers, well, what does that pause mean? But from a practical perspective, we believe that the PPP system will be back up and running when Congress gets it more money, and that this is worth all of our time to find out more about the program and how small businesses and entrepreneurs can get ready to have those conversations with the lenders once the program goes back up online.
Great. Thank you for addressing that. So why don't you want to go ahead and share your presentation, and then I'll start asking you I'll interrogate you is what I really mean after your presentation.
Perfect. I like that. And I am going to go pretty quickly through this deck, primarily because the interrogation is the best part. It not only helps us answer questions, but it also gets a comfort level within the entrepreneurs, because there's some comfort in knowing that you're not the only one who hasn't figured this whole thing out. So let's real quickly go back 5 weeks. Jeanette, you and I, when we talk twice a day, every day, 3 weeks ago seems like 3 months or 3 years ago. And 5 weeks ago seems like 5 months and 5 years ago. But in March, when we knew the pandemic was coming to this country, we knew it would have an impact on our economy. We were very pleased that Congress took quick action, passed 3 laws in 3 weeks. We are going to spend most of our time on that third law that we call the CARES Act, because as you know, anything that happens in Washington, D.C. must have an acronym in order to be legit. And this is no different. We call it the CARES Act. We will spend most of our time on that law. Now, the CARES Act and what we're talking about this afternoon has really 2 flows of money intended to help small businesses survive through the pandemic. Those 2 flows are the SBA Disaster Assistance Program, and then a brand new loan program called the Paycheck Protection Program. And you guessed it, there is an acronym for both of those. EIDL, otherwise known as EDIL, is the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. The Paycheck Protection Program is called the PPP. So sometimes we call them the PPP loans. So now that we know the lingo, let's dive right in. So first of all, the EIDL. I think it's a good starting point when we talk about SBA's disaster loan program. We got to kind of step back and acknowledge that this is not a new program. This is a 60-year program that was designed to help communities rebuild after a tornado, after a hurricane, after a flood, or after a fire. The program was never intended to be a quick source of cash for small business. And the reason I say that, it may not be the best news to hear, but it does explain some of the frustrations that many of us feel when you apply and you don't get an immediate answer or don't get money immediately into your bank account. So the program itself was intended for small businesses to rebuild after a disaster. The way it works is you have to be a small business that has experienced significant economic injury because of the pandemic. Small businesses are defined generally as 500 or fewer employees. Now, there's some flexibility in that definition that we can get into during the questions and answers. But for a general purpose, it's 500 or fewer employees. The terms of the loan are it's a 3.75% interest loan. If you're a nonprofit, it's 2.75%. It's a 30-year fixed term. All principal and interest is deferred for a year. Now, there is one part of that loan that is brand new because of legislation, because of the CARES Act, and that is what's called an emergency EIDL grant. That emergency EIDL grant is up to $10,000. It is on the third screen of the application that I'll touch on in a second. The little box that says, would you like to be considered for an emergency EIDL grant? All the small businesses owners who I've spoken with have said, yes, I would like to receive up to $10,000. And SBA has been implementing this by when there is a decision by the SBA loan specialist. And again, what happens is you apply, then the loan specialist calls you in usually 2 to 3 weeks, and you work through terms and you work through how much debt you can afford to take on, similar to a usual lending discussion, except it's with a government official, not a bank loan officer. And then at that point, or a few days later, after that loan specialist reviews information, they make a decision on what you can get as a loan. Within 3 days of that decision, you will get the grant up to $10,000. The way SBA has been doing this is they allocate $1,000 per employee up to the $10,000 threshold. Now, this is important though. That $10,000 grant does not have to be paid back. And if when you speak with a loan specialist who is making the determination of whether or not you got the loan, you don't actually have to get the loan to still get the grant. And that grant that can be up to $10,000 does not have to be paid back. There is a slight caveat, and we'll get into the PPP loans in a moment, but that caveat is that get your PPP loan forgiven, and we'll dig right into that, then that grant up to $10,000 counts against the forgivable portion of the PPP loan. So,
Tom, can I ask you a couple questions before you go on?
Yep.
Okay. So you, I think, just said you could get the $10,000 grant that you do not have to pay back even if you don't get approved for the rest of this loan. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And unfortunately, I stumble somewhat sometimes when I describe it, and it creates confusion of, well, is it a separate application? Is it the same application? And the simple answer is it's all part of one application. But when the loan decision is made, regardless of what that decision is, you still are eligible for the grant amount up to $10,000.
Right. I went through that loan application process, and it is very simple. It's just a box. Do you want to be considered for this $10,000 grant? So I do know it's simple. Before you go on for the rest of this, on the rest of the EDIL loans, just could you just, a couple of things. Could you remind us, does the EDIL loan have to be spent on any particular, unlike the PPP loan, does this one have to be spent on anything in particular?
No. So that question of how do I spend the money, this is a legitimate loan.
Right. You have to pay this loan back, except for that $10,000, you have to pay it back.
And the only string attached, obviously, is the debt obligation. So no, right. the only, again, I get into these caveats here. The only thing is, if you get the EDIL loan and the PPP loan that we're going to talk about in a second, you cannot spend them on the same things.
Right. Okay. One more thing before I let you finish on the EDIL loans. When we're talking about the programs running out of money, I know that there's the word of the PPP program running out of money. Has anyone talked about this program running out of money?
Yes, Jeanette, actually, I'm glad you said that. So this loan program had a total of $17 billion threshold that they met a few weeks ago. And so while the loan amounts for in a normal disaster are up to $2 million, they've made a determination that they've got to spread this amongst as many small businesses as possible. And they're only lending $1,000 per EDIL application. Plus,
you cut out for 1 second. How much was that?
$15,000.
Got it. Okay, go ahead.
Which is really unfortunate, and that's where it's exciting from where I sit that we have been in front of Congress and in front of the White House as much as possible to say we cannot keep telling small businesses that there's help unless we really mean it. And so we have pushed Congress to add money for this EDIL program. We can't be dangling an amount of up to $2 million unless we really mean it, and that we're passing the laws and giving the money to SBA to actually live up to our promises. So, but that's a great question, and it's a significant concern for all of us who represent small businesses.
I cut you off before you got to talk about your second to last bullet point, which is that the application for the loan has been streamlined. So I want to let you address that, and then you can move on to your next slide. I won't interrupt again for a while.
No, your interruptions actually make things more explainable. So thank you. The disaster assistance loan, the EDIL, it can be accessed online. The website is there, sba.gov/disaster. It takes about 15 minutes to fill out on a smartphone. Again, really kind of weird that you fill out a loan application and you don't put down how much of a loan you're asking for. I get that question a lot. That's the conversation you have with an SBA loan specialist 2 to 3 weeks after the submission. So let's just jump right into the PPP loans. I mean, we keep talking about them, and so there was a little bit of a spoiler alert when we were talking about the SBA loans. First of all, really important distinction between these two flows of money. The SBA disaster loans that we were just talking about, those come from the government directly to you as an entrepreneur or small business. The PPP loans come from banks, lenders, and other finance assistance organizations. They are implemented through the private sector, through bankers and lenders. And when we hear about the 349 billion, and we sometimes we say 350 billion, I guess that sounds better, but we tend to round up. This is the loan program they're talking about. So the loan program that ran out of money at about 11:30 this morning, this is the loan program we're talking about. Now, for all of us who dialed in for this webinar, it is, I promise you, this is not a waste of time, even though the loan program ran out of money. This will enable you to get records and information together. It will also hopefully spur a conversation between you and a banker or a lender so that everything is in line for when we hit play again on this program. You'll be ready to go, ready to get the application in, and the lender will be able to lend you the money. First of all, who qualifies? Same general principle of 500 or fewer employees. There are some exceptions that allow for larger small businesses, and in particular, hotels and food establishments. The loan amount is set by a calculation determined by Congress. It's simple, and we've made it really complicated. Here's the simple explanation. You take last year or the 12 months prior to your loan application, take a monthly average payroll of your company, take 1 month, multiply it by 2.5, that is the loan amount. Now, fast forward 8 weeks after you get the loan. 8 weeks after the loan, if you are able to show the bank that you have devoted over 75% of the loan to payroll, and that 25% was paid for allowable expenses that are laid out in the legislation, which are utilities, rent, interest on your mortgage, and then interest on prior debt obligations. When you show that to the bank, the loan turns into a grant. The money that you have borrowed, when you show that calculation, turns into a grant. It is forgiven. That's what makes this so attractive. Now, it's actually pretty darn attractive even if it wasn't turned into a grant. I mean, this is something that we've kind of jumped past. It's a 1% fixed rate for 2 years, up to $10 million. So that's pretty darn attractive too. And the key to this is it's to provide liquidity to get through the pandemic. And Jeanette, I think you and I have talked a lot of these different scenarios back and forth, and it's infuriating sometimes where it's obvious that the person does not need liquidity to get through the pandemic. They just want a really good deal on getting some additional finance. It drives, I think, all of us crazy. It's like, no, the reason for this is to help Main Street small businesses who would otherwise close their door and shut down, to allow for them to get through the pandemic. And there is an obvious incentive here as well to help keep paychecks in the bank accounts of employees. Let's see what.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah, please.
So this is a question that a couple of people have asked. Mm-hmm. You didn't really get to it yet, but in order for the loan to be forgiven, you have to use 75% of it on payroll.
Yes.
But I think people are a little confused, because if you have to close your business because it's non-essential, then how do you use the money on payroll if your employees aren't working? So I've asked you this before, but just to confirm. Yes. So what they're saying is basically you can put your employees back on the payroll even if they're staying home.
Yep, it's amazing to me. No one puts it as simple as you do, because that is the simplicity of it. And it actually is the motivation behind Congress in the CARES Act. The primary motivation by Congress was to acknowledge this is a healthcare crisis. And when you are faced with a healthcare crisis and people are getting a disease and dying, you need money. You need money to take care of yourself. You need money to take care of your family and your loved ones. And the way they approach the business component of this is they said, you got to keep paying your employees. And Jeanette, as you said, regardless of it, even if you're at work, because we as Congress need to keep money in their bank accounts to get through the pandemic. And so that is the explanation of something that just doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Like, what the heck? I've got to pay people not to work? That doesn't make sense. But if you step back and look at the motivation behind it, which is to keep money into individuals and employees' bank accounts, it makes a little bit more sense. I'm not saying that the whole law makes complete sense, but at least from a motivation perspective, it makes a little more sense if you knew that that's what Congress was trying to accomplish when they first passed this law.
And just to confirm, if you use it to pay your employees who aren't working, they cannot then collect unemployment, correct?
Correct. There are a whole ton of different tax incentives and other things that you can't get the same benefit twice. You can't get like unemployment and then also get a check from your employer. There is a complex web, but really the whole thing is that web can't overlap, so someone could get twice the amount of money that they're supposed to in order to survive the pandemic.
I think you're going to address 1099 payments in a second. 1099 workers in a second, and I think that corresponds to a question someone here is asking, which is if you're self-employed but you don't take a paycheck.
Yeah, let's
apply. So can you answer those both together? I know I wasn't supposed to go to Q&A yet, so I'll stop, but that was the question.
No.
Sorry, Gabrielle.
That will be the last thing on this slide. It's the 1099 confusion. When you look at payroll, you cannot include the 1099 payments as though they were your own payroll. And this has caused a ton of confusion because there are a lot of entrepreneurs in this country who have a one-person shop, but then they rely on 5 or 7 or 12 other individuals. They give them all 1099s. Those cannot be counted as employees when that small business owner is applying for a loan. However, the 1099 earners themselves, otherwise known as independent contractors, they can file for a PPP loan. And you asked the question about, well, if I'm an independent contractor and I get all 1099 income, that's not really payroll. How do I calculate it? The simple way to do it is to simply replace the word payroll with net income. Now, if we want to pretend to be CPAs or accountants, then it's you take the 1040 Schedule C, line 31. That is, in fact, the income that you would be based on up to $100,000 to apply for the PPP loan.
Wait, so one more question.
Sure.
So if you own a business,
Mm-hmm.
let's say it's an LLC or an S Corp, but you're the only employee of the business and you don't officially take a payroll, you are just paying yourself out of the profits of the business. Doesn't make, you're not a 1099 employee then, you're a sole proprietor, but you can't report your payroll because you weren't drawing an official payroll.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, is that the same thing? Then you're really reporting your net income.
That is exactly the case. You're reporting your net income.
Okay.
Yes. So you take your net income, you do a monthly average. Now, let's back up a little bit. So first of all, you take that net income. It cannot exceed $100,000. Then you take your average monthly, multiply it by 2.5. That's what you would ask for a PPP loan. Now, back of the envelope, because I'm bad at math. I was an English major in college. That equates to $20,833.33.
Just in my experience, because I did go through that loan application for the PPP, they actually kind of did the math for you. So you kind of give them the totals and they walk you through the math. So
they do. And I'm glad you said that, because on this slide, I put what is the government's version of a sample application. Very important for folks to know that these applications are from a private bank. So banks can ask for more, or they generally wouldn't ask for less information, but they can ask for more information. And it's pretty self-explanatory, as you had said, Jeanette. But I do want to draw attention to one thing. So the first kind of gray boxes on this application, average monthly payroll. We actually covered that, and I should note that that includes healthcare and retirement benefits, but we covered that. Times 2.5, we covered that. Then it says plus EIDL. And people say, well, what? That's a separate loan. Why is that on the PPP loan? So just to calm everybody down, what that means is there are some people who may have already gotten the EDIL money from SBA, or they may have just been through a disaster. They may have gotten an EDIL loan within the last month or so. And if that's the case, you're able to refinance the EDIL into the PPP loan. But again, we got to be careful here, because whenever you talk about refinancing and sitting down with a banker and a lender, that lender is going to be able to have the discussion with you, with the small business owner, about should you refinance a different loan into this loan? What debt can you take on? What's your liquidity? What do you need to go forward through to survive through the pandemic? I don't want our outline of how this works to supersede a very important conversation between a borrower and the lender, because that's where these types of discussions happen. And there are also other lending products that will be able to help small businesses beyond what we're just talking about here this afternoon.
So one thing, I saw someone post this question in the Q&A, but we should clarify that, well, two things. So this loan application that's in your presentation, which is available from the Treasury Department, is just a sample application, because I've received so many emails from people who said, I downloaded the application, I filled it out, what do I do with it? And the answer is nothing. So you still have to go through your bank and fill out their loan application. This application is really just to give you an idea of the questions you're going to have to answer. Is that correct?
Yes. If you wanted to take a 3-minute shorter version of this webinar, and remember just one thing, it's talk with your lender and banker now.
So that brings me to my next question, which is the other elephant in the room, which is that a lot of banks are telling people, if you're not a previous customer, then we will not consider your application. And then some other banks are saying, we're not offering this program. So what is your advice to people who are experiencing that? Because do you think more banks are going to start offering it once they refund it? refund, not refund.
Once the program's restarted?
Yes.
Yes. So it has been incredibly frustrating for all of us throughout the last 10 days as this program has been launched. Nowhere does that compare to the frustrations that small businesses are feeling right now. The observation, though, through that frustration is that it has gotten better every hour of every day, which means it started out really pretty crappy. A week ago Friday, private banks started making these loans with 1,800 banks that had a relationship with the government. Since then, so in the last 11 days, they have now gotten up to 4,700 lenders. And I'm not saying business and says, hey, I've had a checking account, can I get a PPP loan? Unfortunately, the answer on the other end of the phone is not always yes. But there are more yeses now than there were a week ago. And one of the things that we're going to be pushing on in Washington, D.C., while this program is on pause, and hopefully Congress will put more money in, is for Treasury to approve the non-bank lenders. Because there are a whole host of lenders out there who have not come online yet that will provide answers to small businesses and will give them the yes. For instance, QuickBooks got its application in to be a lender to small businesses that use their platform. Square has their application in for folks who use the Square platform. A lot of retail merchants use Square as a platform. Cabbage and On Deck, two non-bank lenders who are purely online, have a capability to give low dollar loans a lot better than some of our partners in the national bank system do. The ability for them to make these loans is now pending before Treasury and SBA. So while the program is on pause, we're going to be working to push the approval of those applications so that when we hit the play button again, we don't have the same levels of frustration that have happened over the last couple of weeks, where the answer on the other end of the phone is no. But again, to try to be positive about this, there have been more yeses now than there were a week ago.
So, okay, so just a few, I'm watching the Q&As come in. So just a few things to clarify. You expect that it is likely that there will be more funding for the PPP program and that
Yes.
they will start lending to banks again. You
Yes.
expect that more and more banks will come online to offer the PPP program.
Yes.
You expect that non-banks, meaning online lenders, people like QuickBooks or Cabbage or other online lenders, will also likely come online
Yes.
to make the PPP loans. And then lastly, I know that there's also, when we talked about it running out of money, we were talking about the PPP loans, but apparently the EDIL loans, they are also not saying that program is out of money. So are you also expecting that program to get more funding?
We are, although we are prioritizing. If we had to choose one, it's terrible because I have two teenage boys. You never want to choose which is your favorite child. However, we are prioritizing PPP loans. And the reason is because it's quick cash. It's what we've been told by our small businesses is we need money now. So even though the SBA disaster loans are important and those loan applications will be open through December 31st, we believe that if we had to choose one that Congress must act on right now, it's going to be the PPP loans.
But so here's a question for you. If they are taking, as long as they're taking for whatever reason, to issue the PPP loans to give you your money, then are they going to extend the deadline by which you need to use the funding to pay your payroll in order for it to be forgiven? Because if you don't get your loan until May 15th or May 30th, then that doesn't give you a lot of time to spend it before the June 30th deadline. Do you know about that?
So Jeanette, what you're getting at is one of a whole number of fixes to make the whole program work better. So right now we're focused on just giving more money because we believe it would be the quickest thing for Congress to do. As soon as we start making tweaks about lengthening the time or some other things that tons of businesses have been flooding us as well as Congress as ways to improve the program, then we think that it'll take even longer for Congress to do anything. So we're on a two-track process. The train that is on the track that is moving the fastest and we are pulling as hard as we can is just get the PPP loans more money. Another train coming down the track that's a little bit slower, it's a lot heavier, that we are pulling are a whole bunch of different improvements to the program that will work long-term, extending the time period, allowing local chambers of commerce to access the PPP loan program, things like that. And so we're going to be working on that second track as a longer-term legislative solution as well. This last slide here is an exciting development that you and I were kind of briefed into, and I'll share now with the broader group, with the Tory Burch Foundation. Just yesterday, our foundation announced the Save Small Business Fund. They will be giving $5,000 grants to small businesses. The applications open up on Monday at 3 p.m. So not only are we lobbying for Congress to do more, we're actually putting our money where our mouth is and trying to help out, knowing full well that there are tons of small businesses on a shoestring that are hanging on and need help. And we know that even $5,000 would be hugely helpful. And so more information on this is available at savesmallbusiness.com.
Thank you, Tom. Can I ask you more questions?
Yeah, so this is the slide that highlights all of you and your team's great work. Gabrielle had mentioned earlier about the resources on uschamber.com/co. They are fantastic. They're narrated in a way that folks understand, and you head a dedicated team who are updating this information twice a day, every day at the minimum, sometimes 7 or 8 times a day. And we benefit from it. And I know small business owners across the country benefit from it.
Thank you, Tom. Are you ready for more questions?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Someone asked, so for the 25% of the PPP loan that you are not using on payroll, does the cost of health insurance, the cost to the employer for health insurance, can that fall under the 25%?
Actually, that amount falls within the 75%.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
So that, yes.
So
the
Congress
cost,
defined payroll by including retirement and healthcare benefits. Yes.
okay, that's good. That's good to know. I forgot that. I saw someone else ask this question, and I've heard a lot of people ask this question before. They applied for the PPP loan, and now they're realizing that they made a mistake on the application, and they're saying, should I reapply? But just from my experience with the application, they are going to call you to confirm and go over all your information. So I would say no, but you're the expert, so I don't know why I'm answering. What do you think?
We're a team, Jeanette. I would say I'm with you. And Jeanette, we should probably explain a little bit about what we mean by pause. Okay.
Would you?
Because this is the part that can be so infuriating, and there's already a ton of rumor mills about what this means. Do we have to reapply? Do we have to, all this stuff. So the way the process works is you go into a bank, we don't go in anywhere. You communicate with a bank online or by phone. They receive your information. You apply for the loan. Your lender then takes that and sends it to SBA through what's called the E-Trans system. That system okays the loan and spits back to your bank or lender a loan number. At that point, you've been given the loan, but the loan doesn't actually show up in your bank account. And that's what you refer to as having a conversation before everything gets finalized and then they ACH the funds to your account. But it's important to know kind of, you get information to the bank gets the information to SBA, SBA reviews and then sends the bank back the loan number. And at that point, the bank says to you, you've been accepted.
Okay. I don't even remember what the question was that I asked you that I got that answer to. So I'm just going to move on to the next question.
Sure.
So this person is asking that they applied for the EDIL loan early before the process was streamlined. Should they reapply? And I feel like I've heard that you should reapply.
So if you apply before March 30th, because that is the first day that this new law came into effect, you would not have had the option to ask for the grant up to $10,000. Now, that's where it gets complicated, because if you got 10 employees, then yes, you should absolutely reapply. We have been assured that you do not get kicked to the back of the line, but it's somewhat of a black box of a process. There's really no way to tell.
That's where it gets complicated? Because I think it got complicated a long time before that.
No, it got complicated there. I mean, the complications of the loan application for SBA disasters were significant prior to March 30th. They streamlined. It took that gentleman who I've spoken with you about down outside of Dallas. It took him and his dad an entire weekend. You know, two guys with over 40 years of small business experience to get through that disaster loan application. It was horrible.
The new one is simple.
They've come a long way.
A lot of people are asking if I already applied for, now I'm talking about the PPP loans. If I already applied for the PPP loan and my bank has acknowledged my application and I'm somewhere in that process, do you think that the fact that there's no money now means, like, if you've already made it that far, did they set aside funds for you? Or do you think all the money's gone and if you haven't gotten it yet, then you're waiting for the whole process to be refunded?
So that's where the hitting the pause button, I think, is the best metaphor going, because that's our hope, is that it is truly just a pause. A bank actually can't set aside money. I mean, that's part of the challenge here, is that money has got to be guaranteed by the U.S. government in order for it to be set anywhere by a bank. And that's caused some frustration by everybody. But it would obviously depend on the bank or the lender about how they hold that queue. And for me, at least, from a metaphor perspective, it's easiest to understand by just hitting the pause button. And when you hit play again, then the process will start up right where it left. So the next process, you got everything into the bank, and then all of a sudden it was paused. That next step for the process would be the bank would get that to SBA, and SBA would get that back to you, and then they would have the conversation.
Okay. I see a lot of people putting in the Q&A, so I want to address this again because these might be people who joined later, but they're saying, like, no one is accepting applications in all capital letters.
Yep.
So we know, and the thinking is, to your best guess is they're going to put more money in the program, and more banks are going to start. The banks that are on pause are going to start taking applications again. And additionally, more lending institutions of one variety or another will also start taking applications.
So like you, Jeanette, we're a family now that has spent more time together in our house than since our children were in the crib. So the activity that comes to mind is dance party. And when you hit pause, you hit pause. You don't keep dancing. you just hit pause. And then when you hit play again, start dancing again and everything. So I think the advice to many small business owners right now is get the materials together. Call a banker. Don't ask them if they're accepting, but ask, when this program is restarted, what would you advise me to do? And after that, when they hit play, is when you start getting the applications in again. So right now, during the pause part, we are saying that folks should be doing the calculations. There is actually a very neat, there's a very neat tool called Aid Assist by Intuit that it does not sell an Intuit product. It's just open source. You are able to enter in different payroll information, and it gets you what your loan amount could be. That's a good preparatory step to take prior to the application process reopening.
Couple things. I see a lot of people saying my bank is closed in New York. I can't go in. Who do I ask at the bank what is going on? So my experience has been that you are better off going through their website, because the banks are centralizing this PPP loan operation, and it's really not happening at the local bank level. Would you agree?
I would completely agree.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is where your experience as the editor of Co is very helpful. I mean, how many times do you and I hit the refresh button on the different websites and bank portals? It's a constant process, and I can guarantee that when banks reopen, one of the first web portals to give information about it is going to be growwithco.com.
You are shameless.
I am. Little pressure.
But I did see someone ask a question in the Q&A, so I will repeat that, asking about more specifics about the loan forgiveness and what's forgivable and what's not. So actually, just as a less shameless plug, we do have all that information on Co. So at growwithco.com, we do have all these articles that really break down exactly what the loans are and what portions are forgiven. So Tom, one thing that someone asked that I don't know the answer to, on those EDIL loans, you're saying right now there's a $15,000 max on what they're lending, but then there's a $10,000 grant. Is that a combined $25,000, or are they giving you the first $10,000 free and just another $5,000 that you're paying back?
Ideally, it's up to a combined, but I have to walk back my statements a little bit. I used to be a government official, and so I could say things with the full authority of the United States. I can't do that anymore. I work for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We are a business advocacy organization. My friends who work for government have said this is how they're allocating the funds. There's been no official statement from it. We're really lucky to work with over 1,600 local and state chambers of commerce. So you and I get inbound emails all the time. What we hear from small business owners all around the country is that they're not getting EDIL loan money more than $15,000. But there's been no official statement that says this is how we're going to do it. I honestly don't know why that is, but I do feel as though it's my responsibility to set expectations with small businesses as best I can.
People are, just to confirm, people are asking, can you apply for both the PPP and the EDIL? And we know the answer is yes. But then other people are saying, can you apply for these loans and unemployment? And the answer is?
You can't be on both.
Right.
So no. So that would be the double benefit. You would be getting a federal tax benefit for unemployment because they added $600 per unemployment check for every person on unemployment. Nor if you had employees and you hired them back to get the maximum benefit on your PPP loan, those employees would not be able to receive unemployment as well.
I have a question that someone just asked, and I didn't think of this, and you are really probably not the right person to answer, so just say if you don't know. But they're asking about the Save Small Business grants that the U.S. Chamber Foundation is giving out.
Yep.
And it says that they should be in an economically vulnerable area. So did they mean economically vulnerable right now during coronavirus, or is there some other, what do they mean?
Yes. So let me get at the motivation and then what they mean. So the U.S. Chamber Foundation is a foundation that must do activities to benefit underserved and struggling areas of the country. So they would not be able to simply say, we're going to give out $5,000 grants to every business who applies, because then that doesn't meet the underlying requirement for their foundation. So they had to make a distinction. How does it become a charitable venture based on what their, how they were formed as a foundation? So what they did was they came up with it's a socioeconomic measurement of how economies are doing in the United States before coronavirus. And then the top 20% of those zip codes are not eligible for the grant. So if you live in an affluent area, if your business is in an affluent area, you would not be eligible for the grant. There are really just two criteria, and this is an application that is designed to take less than 10 minutes to fill out on purpose. One is you got to have a business with 3 to 20 employees, and 2, you be in a non-affluent area. And in the application, they have a zip code tool. You put in your zip code, and it bounces back on whether or not you're in a non-affluent area. Those are my terms, a non-affluent area or not.
Okay. Again, just to confirm, someone's asking about 401k contributions and the PPP, that is counted as payroll, the employer's yes. 401k contributions.
Correct. Employee benefits and healthcare and retirement. Yes.
So some people here are asking about their rent, if there's any government plans to make their rent forgivable, not meaning if they pay it with a PPP loan, which we already know they can use it for a portion. But like in New Jersey, the governor has said you can't be evicted, essentially. Your business can't be evicted. You don't know of any national regulations underway that would essentially say you cannot evict a business if they can't pay their rent right now.
I don't. I think another shameless plug for growwithco.com. You've done a very good job of having the different states and localities. It would be impossible to take every charitable thing going on. I'll give, another shameless plug. I mean, the Tory Burch Foundation has actually been contributing material and shoes to healthcare workers during the pandemic. No community is absent a ton of charitable stuff. And it's actually done my heart good to see that most of that is private sector driven and not necessarily elected officials saying thou shalt do one thing or another. So that's a long way of answering no. That I'm not aware of any federal movement that requires rent forbearance.
Okay. Someone asked if they apply for the PPP loan and get it, and they have to use it though to pay back rent or utilities because they haven't been able to pay them, as long as it's within that 25%. Even if it was back payroll, no, it has to be paid during that time period.
Yeah, it's got to be paid during the 8 weeks. We get a lot of questions about, well, can I front load 2 years of utilities? No. What you do is it's got to be in the ordinary course of business. And so when you go back to the bank at the end of 8 weeks, you would submit the different types of bills that come in during those 8 weeks that you pay, your rental check. I think I can't make the decision for the bank, but I think the bank would raise an eyebrow or perhaps two if all of a sudden they saw 2 years of rent payments front loaded into or back loaded into a forgiveness component of the PPP loan.
Well, just to give this person the benefit of the doubt, I assume they meant just for the past month or so that they've been struggling.
No, it says so the law is actually pretty specific. It discusses this thing called covered period, and that covered period is the 8-week time between when the money hits your account and the end of 8 weeks. And the discussion of what the payments are eligible for are all within those 8 weeks. The only difference is you're allowed to pay interest on mortgage or interest on prior debt obligations. So if you brought forward a debt of $2 million and you were paying interest on it within those 8 weeks, that interest is forgivable.
Okay, I see Gabrielle just popped in. Are you telling us we're going too long?
We have a few quick minutes, and I actually have 2 questions that I keep seeing in the chat that I want to make sure are addressed. One is for the EDIL loans. If people haven't heard anything, what should they anticipate? If they submitted their application and have not received any sort of communications, what should they expect?
So the EDIL loans opened up actually on March 16th. And it took 3 weeks for many of those applicants to hear from a loan official. If it has been more than 3 weeks since you applied, you should call the disaster loan helpline. I can get that information to you afterwards. I don't want to promise that that is a smooth process. It is an exercise in patience, but that's the only way in to check on an application.
Got it. And for many of our small business owners, hour by hour, day by day counts, right? So the fact that we're hearing PPP, there's a pause on it. EDIL, there's practically a pause on it. Can you share some alternative funding, Tom? I know through the Tory Burch Foundation, we partner with Bank of America to distribute loans through CDFIs. And before this program, I had never heard of CDFIs, and they are incredible lenders that are all around the country and could be a great resource. Also, Jeanette, you and I had had a lot of conversation about tax relief programs that small business owners should be taking advantage of, that there are state programs. So can you shed some light on, you're not hearing back from your bank, you're not hearing back from the SBA. What are other things that people can spring into action on today?
Well, let me give you a 2-part answer, and that second part will also enroll Jeanette in the answer. So the first part is really reinforces that I have the best job at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and that is because every community where entrepreneurs and small businesses are woven into the fabric of that community, there is help. It differs community by community, whether it's Takeout Tuesday or other, GoFundMe campaigns. I mean, they're there, they're wonderful, and tap into that network. The other approach also, though, is that Jeanette, with her work with growwithco.com, does a very good job of tracking some of those broader initiatives at a federal or state level, whether it's tax relief, payroll tax relief, and some other things. And Jeanette, I'll push it back to you to explain a little bit of how you've kind of broken down federal and state and local aid that might be available to some entrepreneurs looking for funds.
Yeah, I think so. The tax relief portion, Gabrielle, is a little bit, there's a lot of different pieces of that. So we definitely have some content on that so you can walk through which things apply to you. And then there are, as Tom said, there's a lot of grants and a lot of funding available from companies, organizations. And another thing we didn't mention, but that I think is worth checking out, is both SCORE and the SBDCs, the Small Business Development Centers. They have all that information, and they're willing to give you one-on-one consulting advice for free. So they will connect you with someone who can really walk you through all those resources. So that's SCORE.org, and the SBDCs, I don't remember their website off the top of my head, but I'm sure, Gabrielle, you share that on your site. But there's a lot of free resources there.
We can't forget the Women Business Centers.
Yeah.
they're all around the country. There's more than 100 of them, and they're in Puerto Rico as well. And 40% of them are lenders. So they could be a great resource, and they provide mentoring. So that's another great one.
Yes.
What else, Jeanette? I know you have more.
No, that was what I was going to say. And I was thinking of yesterday I hosted a different event where we talked about how to stay connected with your customers during this time. And it's really hard if you're not open for business. And we were talking to a guy in Houston who owns 4 restaurants. They're all closed. And he said, this is when I remember why I became an entrepreneur to begin with, because I have to start over and I have to find creative ways to do things and creative ways to find funding and creative ways to meet my customers, because I can't meet them at the counter in my store anymore. And I think hopefully that's what we're here to try to help you do. But I don't want to minimize people's struggles. I mean, I understand this is super, super devastating and frustrating to people, and we don't have all the answers, but we do feel your pain, and we are trying to help as much as we can. And I know Tom feels that way too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for your time, your insights. I know everyone on this webinar will be visiting growwithco.com as well as torybirchfoundation.org. And I know both sites will continue to update with news and resources. This pandemic is hour by hour, day by day. We're with you all. We want to get you the best resources possible. So please stay in touch. Let us know what you thought of the webinar, what other topics you would like us to consider. And we're just sending everyone our very best. Please stay healthy, stay in touch, and thanks everyone. Thank you so much.